Yes, well, okay, my name is Dennis Mans. I am from Suriname. I am a full professor of pharmacology since 2008, and my chair has been charged specifically with research with respect to plants with medicinal properties. I hold this chair at the Department of Pharmacology of the Faculty of Medical Sciences. And that is a faculty of our own only university in Suriname. That is the Anton de Kom University of Suriname. Many people don't know where Suriname is. Well, I'm going to explain this very briefly. Suriname is a relatively small country at the northeast coast of South America. Okay. It borders the Atlantic Ocean to the north, Brazil to the south, to the west, Guyana, and to the east, French Guyana.
French Guyana,
of
yes.
course, one of the departments of France in Europe. In fact, it is for many Surinamese people, French Guyana is the gateway to Europe.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's easier to go from French Guyana to Europe instead of going to Amsterdam.
Ah, okay.
And lastly, speaking of Amsterdam, Suriname used to be a colony of the Netherlands, and that is the reason that the official language of our country is Dutch.
Okay.
In fact, Suriname is the only South American country where Dutch is spoken. 17th century on, there many enslaved Africans have been imported in Suriname.
Yeah.
And those people originated from probably around 10 different countries from Africa.
Yeah.
Now, the languages spoken originally by the ancestors of those enslaved people are still spoken in Suriname. After that, we had the Chinese.
Okay.
In 1850, around 1850, the first Chinese came to Suriname. After that, people from India came to Suriname as indentured laborers.
Okay.
After that, people from Indonesia came as indentured laborers as well. Then, of course, we have lots of immigrants from Caribbean countries around Suriname, like from Cuba, Jamaica, the Antilles, Dominica, of course, also from Brazil. There's also Portuguese is spoken.
Okay.
So you can imagine it's a great melting pot.
Yeah, melting pot, multicultural. Okay.
Exactly. But nevertheless, Dutch is the official language.
Okay.
But let me tell you, every person in Suriname speaks at least 3 languages.
3 languages.
Fluently. Of course, his or her native language. Then,
yes.
Of course, English. English is a must.
English.
Because, and of course, Dutch.
Dutch.
But we have to speak English because nobody speaks Dutch.
Ah, yeah, of course.
South America.
Yeah, okay.
Let me tell you this, I am a pharmacologist, so I'm not a botanist.
Yeah, of course, yes, I know.
The details, the really botanical details that you may have got those from my colleague from the National Herbarium from Suriname, who you had been into contact with. But I can tell you a little bit.
Yes, thanks.
QUASSIA amara, that's the genus name QUASSIA is from the name of a freedman, an African enslaved freedman who lived in the 17th century in Suriname, who was the first to broadly and commercially apply QUASSIA amara as a traditional medicine.
Okay.
And that name was, the name QUASSIA had been given to the genus by Linnaeus, the Swedish scientist who came up with the binomial name system for every living being. The species name Amara refers to the bitter taste of particularly the hardwood and the stem bark. And Amara is, I guess it is Latin for bitter.
Okay.
So QUASSIA amara means indeed the bitter quassi.
Okay. Okay.
Bitter quassi. It is a member, one of the relatively few members of the plant family Cimarubaceae. It is a relatively short tree. I guess that its maximum height is 5 meters.
Yes.
Mostly even only 4 meters. I heard from people that they cultivated this plant because it's also cultivated as an ornamental plant, that their plant in their garden reached up to 6-7 meters.
6 to 7 meters. Okay.
In the wild, it is part of what we call the understory of the rainforest, meaning that it grows beneath the tall plants that are typical for the rainforest. It can do with relatively little direct sunlight.
Yes.
It prefers lots of humidity, so you can mostly find it along streams, creeks, rivers, etc.
Okay.
It is very recognizable. I hope you have a picture or an image to show your public.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Extremely recognizable because of the bright pink-red colored flowers. Also, from a distance of a few hundred meters, you can recognize it. Because it's so, the pink-red flowers are so recognizable. Once you see it, you never forget it. I know some. We did some experiments as well in my lab that were experiments regarding the presumed anti-cancer activity of extracts from the plant. Okay. But let me first start to mention that in fact, every part of the plant is being used traditionally.
Okay.
But so flowers, leaves, etc., but mostly mainly the stem bark and the heartwood are being, because as they told me, once again, I'm not that this is really not my department. The botanists told me that those parts of the plant contain the highest concentration of biologically active compounds, and we'll come to that in a few minutes.
Okay.
If you try to summarize the uses of particularly the heartwood, of preparations from the heartwood and from the stem bark of Quassia, you're going to see, number one, it is used against malaria. In fact, malaria fevers. Traditionally, and that is indeed since Quassia, since the 17th century, when the freed enslaved African Quassi commercialized Quassia amara stem bark and heartwood, particularly for that purpose. But I have to tell that Quassi didn't have that knowledge from himself. He most probably acquired the knowledge from the indigenous peoples from Suriname, who, like almost all other indigenous peoples from South America, had used Quassia amara stem bark and heartwood for centuries before Columbus.
Okay.
What are other traditional uses? Other traditional uses are uses, for instance, against many different gastrointestinal problems, ranging from digestive problems to infectious diseases of the gastrointestinal tract to anorexia nervosa. You know when people refuse to eat. And it seems to evoke appetite.
Okay.
It is, as I mentioned already, also used against certain types of cancer. I mean, these are the traditional uses I'm giving you.
Yes,
and
the traditional.
Yes, these are the traditional uses. This is what people do without, in fact, scientific evidence, but they do it for centuries. I mean, many peoples. It's not only Suriname, but in fact, all traditional systems where Quassia amara is indigenous and where Quassia amara has been cultivated.
Okay.
First, let me go back rapidly. Quassia amara is indigenous to the northern to tropical America, the northern parts of the tropical, the Amazonian parts of South America, as well as, let's say, the parts of Central America that are closest to South America.
Okay.
From there, it has spread by cultivation, even all the way down to Argentina, but also to many islands of the Caribbean, in the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and even across the Atlantic Ocean to Africa and some Asian countries.
Okay.
And there it became also part of the traditional medicinal practices of those peoples over there, probably because they heard from the South American and the Central American people what the benefits might be. Preparations from quassia are also used against lice, when you have lice in your hair, or against certain itches, dermatological problems, for certain fungal infections on the skin. And I understood that they are even used, such as preparations, to wash the mouth, ease the pain, and to disinfect after a tooth extraction. Commercially, the most important use of Quassia amara, at least preparations from Quassia amara, is the use of the bitter compounds as part of Angostura bitters. You heard of probably Angostura bitters. These are the most defining components of, I love it, gin tonics. With a lemon twist, slight bitter taste with a lemon twist. That is Quassia amara. And of course, very, very, very small concentrations, just to give it that little bitter touch. And the preparation of the concentrated Angostura bitters is mostly in the hands of a company, a few companies in Trinidad and Tobago. That is one of the greatest means of subsistence of Trinidad and Tobago. And from there, they export the concentrated bitters, Quassia amara bitters, to all countries throughout the world. We incorporate them in their drinks. Of course, it is Quassia amara preparations are also used traditionally all through the world, all over the world, as insect repellent, particularly as a repellent against mosquito bites. They told me, I never tried it, but they told me that you can take a preparation, preparation of the hardwood, concentrated, and then rub it on your skin, and then mosquitoes won't bite you anymore. But let me tell you this: these are the traditional uses in South America and Central America and throughout the world, where in places where Quassia amara has been cultivated. In many cases, unfortunately, there is no hard scientific evidence for these uses. The evidence that there is mostly based on preclinical studies. For instance, that it might be beneficial against cancer. That has never been evaluated in patients in clinical studies, but in cell culture.
In cell culture.
And of course, cell culture, to extrapolate cell culture data to the data in cancer patients, is a long way. But at least it's a beginning. And there have also been obtained information from evidence that Quassia amara preparations would be beneficial against digestive problems, against gastrointestinal problems, because their effect that has been shown in studies I understood with isolated guinea pig ileum preparations, beneficial effects on stomach acid secretions, as well as gut motility. what is a few studies have shown, at least have claimed. In my opinion, more studies must be done, but the studies that have been so far performed have claimed, have provided some evidence that Quassia amara is safe in general, but should be avoided by pregnant women.
Okay.
There might be a risk of cellular malformation, and you know that particularly during the first 2 or 3 months of pregnancy, then it is very critical that the pregnant woman does not ingest compounds, substances that might interfere with organogenesis.
Okay.
Because that is particularly the most critical part of the pregnancy, because then the organs are being formed.
Yes.
And that is why they say that pregnant women should avoid. A few other species also, a few other studies also say that Quassia amara preparation should be avoided by breastfeeding women.
Okay.
There is no hard evidence for that, but there are some indications that might interfere with the health of the child. Then there are other studies that say, well, okay, it might be possible that Quassia amara preparations lower blood sugars levels in the blood.
Yeah.
And that might be a reason that Quassia amara preparations are recommended traditionally against diabetes mellitus.
Okay.
But you have to know exactly what you do. That is what Shaman told me a few years ago. If you're going to treat diabetic patients with Quassia amara preparation, you have to know really well what you're doing, because it seems that indeed that it has a very small therapeutic window.
Yeah.
And that is the reason, therapeutic index, the difference between therapeutic effects and toxic effects. And that is the reason that Quassia amara preparations are also contraindicated in patients with diabetes.
Okay.
People with diabetes are advised to be very careful with Quassia amara preparations, because it can lower blood sugars together with, for instance, the pills you get from a doctor. And people like to do that.
Yeah.
They take the herbal preparations together with the doctor's prescription.
Of course.
And that combination might lower blood sugar levels to dangerously low levels.
Okay.
Now what is the it's also interesting because of its effects on the gastrointestinal tract, and those effects have been, there are indications that Quassia amara preparations might have indeed some effects on processes occurring in the gastrointestinal effect, and that might explain the beneficial or the claimed beneficial effects of Quassia amara preparations against all those gastrointestinal problems I just mentioned. Well, people say, well, okay, be careful when you're going to use Quassia amara preparations with, for instance, antacids, anti-acid preparations, but also with H2 blockers of the H2 receptors.
Yeah. Okay.
But also with proton pump inhibitors, which are also, of course, blockers of gastric acid production and secretion. So these things, it is good to know, because often people say, well, okay, it is danger, it is herbal, it is a plant material, so it is safe. Of course, it is not necessarily. You have to know exactly what you do. So to summarize, there are indications that might support, mostly preclinical indications that might support the many traditional uses of Quassia amara, and those preliminary scientific indications that support the traditional uses of Quassia amara are not at all sufficient to say, to be able to say hard, to provide hard evidence, but they are sufficient to be careful on the certain circumstances.
Yeah, okay.
I almost forget one thing. There is also preclinical evidence that support the use of Quassia amara preparations against malaria, because in vitro, it has been observed in vitro in the lab. It has been observed that Quassia preparations block the development of the malaria parasites inside human cells.
Okay.
So it blocks in vitro. It blocks infection of human cells.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Say.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
What is known?
Okay.
About the traditional uses combined with the scientific evidence.
Yes. Okay.
QUASSIA AMARA. In Suriname, because of the many different peoples with very different backgrounds, there are many forms of traditional medicine.
Okay.
And that is one of and the people adhere very strictly. They are very proud of their traditional medicine practices, of their medicinal tradition. They're very proud of it because it is a means of people to adhere to their origins. So people from India, of course, they feel themselves Surinamese, but at the same time, they say, okay, I am Surinamese, but I have Indian roots.
Yes.
So I adhere strictly to Ayurveda.
Ayurveda, yeah.
Etc. Etc. But that is good. But the downside is that in this COVID-19 pandemic, the authorities have a very hard time to convince people to vaccinate, to take the vaccination, because people feel okay, my traditional medicines have helped my people for centuries, and that is why I am still alive.
Yeah.
Because that is proof of the efficacy of my traditional medicines. So don't come and bother me with your vaccines that we don't know anything about what will happen next year of the efficacy in the long run.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons that in Suriname, but probably also in other countries, but let's talk now about Suriname. Let's call them anti-vaxxers. Many anti-vaxxers, they swear by drinking Quassia preparations to prevent, but also to treat COVID infections. And you know how they do that. Huh? This is something that is very interesting. It is part of Surinamese culture.
Yeah.
There are Quass people, men and women, who make from the Quassia Amara hardwood bitter cups.
Bitter cups, yes. It's very fun. This story is fantastic. I'll let you explain because it's very
great. I don't have an image, but you can also find this image if you would like to show that to your audience.
Yeah.
You can find them easily on the internet. Anyway, these bitter cups, they are in fact carved from a piece of Quassia Amara hardwood, and of course it's very bitter because they contain the Quassinoids, the bitter substances that have pharmacological activity in Quassia Amara. And what is the practice? And this is really general practice in Suriname. They have such a bitter cup on their nightstand, and before they go to bed, they fill it with water. And the male people, of course, they are more macho, with rum or some other alcoholic beverage.
Okay.
And they leave it sleep overnight. And when they wake up the next morning, they drink the water or the alcohol with the Quassia extract in.
Oh, nice.
Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Because this is, they really believe it is male people. They believe that it increases your male performance, your potency.
Okay.
That is very important for our people. Particularly our people is very important. They also believe it protects you against many infectious diseases.
Okay.
They believe it would fight fever, it would fight flu, it would also prevent and fight COVID, they believe. There is no evidence, unfortunately, for that, but people do that. And I believe that is the reason that we still have problems to control COVID in Suriname.
Yeah.
It would control hypertension, it would prevent hypertension, a range of disease. It is one of the most widely used traditional medicines in Suriname. the bitter cup preparations.
Okay.
Women use in addition bitter cup preparations for other reasons. They also prepare it. The women do not only use bitter cup preparations, but also infusions or decoctions from pieces of the Quassia heartwood. They boil it and they drink it as tea, particularly to cleanse the uterus when they have, for instance, heavy menstrual periods, but also to cleanse the uterus after having given birth or after a miscarriage.
Okay.
It seems that it removes, that is what they tell me, it removes all the built up debris in the uterus after these events.
Okay.
And for women, that is one of the most important reasons, Surinamese women, the most important reasons to use Quassia Amara preparations. In addition to, of course, hope that it would help you prevent and treat infectious diseases. For males, the most important reason for using Quassia preparations is because of their performance, the sexual performance.
Okay.
These preparations are called popularly in Suriname bitters.
Okay.
People really swear by their bitters, and you can buy them everywhere. And in many cases, there are pieces of bitter plants added to the bottle, to the preparations, in addition to pieces of Quassia heartwood.
Okay.
People also may add other bitter leaves from other plants to their bitter cup, which they leave steep overnight on their nightstand.
Okay.
Because they believe that the more it is bitter, the better it would be for the particularly cardiovascular system.
Okay.
It is Surinamese belief. I guess I read this also had also been mentioned in other traditional medicinal systems, such as Indian Ayurveda and Indonesian Jawa, that bitter stands for heart and cardiovascular system.
Okay.
So I guess that might be the background. It's very interesting. Huh? The quassinoids are probably nature's most bitterest substances.
Okay.
And there are several quassinoids. Huh? There is quassin, there is neoquassin, there is that very famous, or rather perhaps infamous, simicalacton. Simicalacton E.
Yes, E.
Particularly, but we come to that later.
Yes,
but
later.
These are all quassinoids.
Yeah.
Quassinoids, and together they are responsible for the bitter taste.
Ah, okay.
And once again, in many preclinical studies, these compounds have been found responsible for the pharmacological activities in vitro and in preclinical models, responsible for the activity of quassinoid of Quassia amara extracts.
Okay. So the
question. But once again, this is in vitro. This is preclinical.
Yes.
And I really think it is time that people start to conduct clinical studies.
Okay.
But of course, it's easier said than done, because clinical studies means money.
Yes. Yeah.
Very expensive.
Very expensive. Yeah.
And of course, there should be a reason. I've talked about this with some very important malaria experts throughout the world, and they told me no interest. You know why?
No.
Because the pills we have developed from the Artemisia, the Chinese plant, those are standard now all throughout the world. They are cheap, they are easily prepared, and why you're gonna go through something difficult and a lot of what might take many years to evaluate, for instance, simicalacton E, while you already have something that has been proven to be efficacious and accepted against malaria. Makes sense.
Yes, makes sense. Yes.
This is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because I never wondered about that, why people use the stem bark and the heartwood particularly, and not so much the leaves and the flowers and the fruits.
Yes.
I didn't find anything and I really, yeah, I didn't find any indications.
Okay.
I'm really not sure. The only thing I can come up with is 1 or 2 studies where they compared the concentration of quassinoids in different parts of the plant. And that those, I think it were only 2 or maybe at the most 3 studies, which, and in those studies, the emphasis was on something else, not on comparing the quassinoid content of the plant parts. But in those studies, it turned out that the stem root and the stem bark, the heartroot and the stem bark had the highest concentrations of quassinoids.
Okay.